In the quiet words of Seneca, every difficulty in life is a test of our resilience. But what if every insult, every dismissive glance, every cutting remark is not merely a difficulty, but a diagnostic tool? What if the sting you feel when someone criticizes you isn't about their words at all, but about the unaddressed whispers within yourself? We often fight fiercely against external judgment, believing it threatens our worth. Yet, how readily we allow it to pinpoint our deepest insecurities, to amplify our secret doubts, to hold a mirror to the parts of us we keep hidden. Instead of simply deflecting criticism, the Stoics teach us to read it. It's not the arrow that wounds, it's the unhealed target it finds within. The Stoics understood that criticism, mockery, dismissal, and misunderstanding hold no inherent power. They are neutral signals, like a distant foghorn or a shifting wind. What gives them their piercing quality is the internal resonance we provide, the ready-made narrative we already have playing, the unguarded entry point we offer in our minds. They are showing you is not an accusation. It's not an invitation to self-blame or a denial of external malice. It's not about walking through life immune to others' flaws. It's about cultivating the kind of self-awareness that uses external friction for internal growth. The type of presence that sees beyond the surface attack. The kind of integrity that doesn't crumble because a weakness was highlighted, but uses that light to strengthen. This is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the art of internal alchemy. To truly understand why an insult bothers you is to reclaim your power, to stop letting others unwittingly expose your hidden vulnerabilities, to turn external noise into internal clarity. It is to learn that the path to self-mastery often begins with a perceived affront. This isn't just a philosophical concept. It's a profound lens for self-discovery. Consider a simple scenario. Someone, perhaps casually, calls you irresponsible. The word hangs in the air for a second, but the sting you feel, that sharp intake of breath, the racing thoughts, the sudden defensiveness can linger for hours. You carry it into your next task, your mood, and even your interactions. It isn't the label itself that unsettles you. It's the silent, hidden fear that perhaps, deep down, a part of you agrees with it. It's the echo of an old narrative you've whispered to yourself. The Stoic views this pattern not only in insults, but in every form of external judgment. They ask, why did that particular comment resonate? What part of me does it connect with? What old doubts or insecurities did it unexpectedly illuminate? Is there a kernel of truth here, however uncomfortable? What assumption or fear did I project onto this moment? What part of this discomfort is real? And what part is optional, amplified by my unchecked inner dialogue? Most people react as if the judgment is a direct assault on their reality. They conflate what was said with who they are, and this fusion creates intense suffering. But the Stoic separates the two. They pause. They look at the external comment with detached clarity and hold their internal reaction at a distance until its source is understood. This is not an attempt to suppress hurt. It is the choice to understand the origin of the hurt before allowing it to dominate. This questioning doesn't erase valid criticism. It doesn't deny that people are genuinely unkind or pretend that painful things aren't painful, but it reveals how much of our suffering is rooted in our internal landscape. It shows that when we separate external remarks from internal resonance, we begin to reclaim control. Not by controlling what others say, but by mastering what we believe about ourselves. The Stoic trains their mind to notice the internal shadow in real time and to question its connection to the external comment before surrendering to its influence. They develop the skill to say, "That was said, but I decide why it matters to me." To use insult as a mirror is not to walk through life seeking flaws or inviting attacks. It is to live with profound self-awareness, with inner honesty. It is to see clearly, and, in seeing clearly, to heal and grow. The Stoic doesn't aim to feel nothing. They aim to feel rightly. They aim to let challenging feelings point them toward hidden truths. without allowing those feelings to own them. In this way, they become stronger, not through denial, but through deeper understanding. They do not armor themselves with indifference, but with introspection. Every time they pause to interrogate the echo of an insult, they build a mind that is harder to truly wound. Not because they are closed off from life, but because they are deeply rooted in their truth. This is the beginning of using insult as a catalyst, not by shutting down, not by running away from uncomfortable feelings, but by learning how to interpret them with intelligence and intent. It means understanding the difference between reacting to a comment and responding to your internal data, choosing the latter even when the initial sting is sharp. It means building a self where external critique becomes a path to internal strength. By training the mind to see the internal reflection for what it is, not as a definitive statement of your worth, we step out of illusion and into clarity. The Stoic commits to this clarity like a physician returns to their patient daily. It is an ongoing practice, not a one-time insight. The more they work at it, the sharper their diagnostic skill become. They learn to catch the echo before it becomes a spiral. They choose reflection over projection, investigation over assumption. And through this deliberate training, the Stoic builds self-knowledge. Not the fragile kind that depends on external praise, but a self-knowledge that thrives even when others misjudge. They do not achieve this by avoiding criticism or retreating from painful feedback. They build it by studying their internal responses, by understanding their nature, their triggers, their limits, and then aligning their self-perception accordingly. They do the same with external comments, holding them up to the light until what remains is only what serves truth and growth. To use insult as a mirror is not to be distant. It is to be deeply present with your internal landscape, but unswayed by superficial attacks. It is to let the criticism land without letting it penetrate your core. It is to act not from ego, but from insight. This is how the Stoic lives, not to prove others wrong, but to know themselves better. One of the most persistent sources of distress is this: we believe other people's judgments define us. We internalize their opinions, measure our worth by their assessments, and let their perceptions dictate our very identity. The Stoic calls this what it is, a self-imposed prison, because in doing so, we hand over the power to interpret ourselves. We become unwitting subjects, our self-concept shaped not by truth, but by the transient and often flawed perceptions of others, many of whom are deeply lost within their minds. Epictetus wisely said, "It is not he who reviles you or strikes you who insults you, but your opinion that these things are insulting." In modern terms, you are not bothered by someone's critique, but by the fact that you believe it validates a pre-existing fear within you. You're not wounded by their dismissive tone, but by the meaning you assign to your response to it. The remark is not the injury. Your internal agreement or fear of its truth is. This is not to say people don't behave badly. They do, but their behavior is theirs. Your internal landscape and the meaning you derive are yours, and in that separation lies your profound liberation. The Stoic understands that no one else's mind is under their jurisdiction. You cannot enter someone's thoughts. You cannot govern their biases or rewrite their internal stories. You can't control whether someone misunderstands you, labels you, or treats you unfairly. You can only control whether you allow their external commentary to shape your internal truth. And the moment you try to control what cannot be controlled, you begin to suffer. This is not cold detachment. It is radical self-honesty. It is a shift from external validation to internal verification. When you stop trying to manage how others see you, you free yourself to genuinely explore how you see yourself. You stop performing and start genuinely becoming. You stop chasing external approval and start cultivating intrinsic self-worth. You stop rehearsing a role and start inhabiting your authentic self, one aligned with virtue and self-knowledge rather than fleeting validation. This freedom feels revolutionary at first, especially in a world addicted to external feedback. But once you taste it, once you begin to build a self-worth that doesn't shrink or swell based on someone else's opinion, you become formidable. You become consistent. The noise outside no longer reveals a hidden weakness inside because you've already faced it. To use insult as a mirror is not to stop caring. It is to stop needing. Needing every opinion to be positive. Needing to be understood by everyone. Needing every external comment to align with your desired self-image. These are the chains the Stoic breaks. Not through arrogance, but through alignment with what can be controlled. When your sense of worth no longer depends on someone else's diagnosis, you become truly resilient. Not untouched, but unshaken. You walk through the world with an internal compass, not a weather vane. The world will always offer its varied opinions. Let them pass. Let them blow through like wind across a field. The Stoic does not argue with every gust. They simply remain grounded in their self-knowledge, using the wind to test the strength of their roots. That is the power of not needing the world to affirm you to know who you are. To genuinely learn from an insult is not to be numb. It is to respond consciously. It is not the absence of emotion that defines a Stoic, but the disciplined direction of it. The Stoic knows that emotion is not the problem. Unchecked reaction to emotion is. Feelings are natural, human, and inevitable. But what we do with them, and how we interpret their signals, is where mastery begins or ends. The moment someone says something critical or dismissive, the untrained mind fires off an immediate response. Anger, defensiveness, shame, or even an unconscious agreement. But the Stoic inserts a gap, a sacred space between the external trigger and their internal analysis. That gap is the opportunity for insight. Viktor Frankl, from his profound experience, wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." That space is not simply a delay, it is an inner laboratory. A moment long enough to identify the real reason the comment stung. A pause deep enough to call on your values of truth and self-awareness rather than your wounds. The Stoic trains that space like a scientist trains for an experiment daily, deliberately, with respect for how much truth can be uncovered. They do not aim to suppress the feeling of hurt, but to observe it, to say, I feel vulnerability arising here, without letting it dictate their next thought or action, and then to sit with it like a critical researcher, not a victim, to treat the emotion not as a master, but as a messenger. They let the emotion speak its truth about their internal state, but not dictate their worth. They let it be known, but not be the ultimate judge. This is where the training lives, in the breath before the reply, the silence before the assumption, the pause before the spiral of self-doubt. The Stoic doesn't eliminate their humanity, they refine it. They shape it into something useful, something revealing, something strong. They turn raw instinct into intelligent self-discovery. The world offers 1,000 chances a day to feel offended, to be judged, or to have a hidden insecurity revealed. But every one of these chances is also an invitation to return to your principles of self-knowledge, to prove your mastery, to reinforce your training. The Stoic does not avoid these moments. They embrace them as opportunities to strengthen their understanding of self. Each challenge becomes a rep, a deliberate choice that thickens the muscle of introspection and sharpens the edge of their clarity. In daily life, this means catching yourself in the moment. Before you lash out at a perceived slight, before you internalize a harsh judgment, before you let someone else's narrow view infect your self-concept. It means walking away from an unproductive debate, not because you are weak, but because you are in control of your inner work. It means letting others have their opinion, because their opinion isn't worth derailing your self-discovery. It means staying grounded when others are projecting their issues, and holding stillness when everything around you is trying to pull you into defensiveness. And sometimes it means asking yourself, why did that bother me? When your ego screams for vindication, because you've learned that self-awareness is often the most powerful response. It also means learning to spot the fork in the road where one path leads to an external reaction and the other to internal inquiry. It means developing an awareness that is sensitive, not defensive. You begin to catch the early signal, the tightening in your chest, the flush in your face, the quickness of your judgment. You see it coming and treat it not as a trigger, but as a teacher. And instead of plunging forward, you pause. You observe. You remind yourself that you are not at the mercy of your reflexes. You are a steward of your interpretation. You ask, what is this revealing about me? And in asking, you make space for that insight to lead. The more you practice this pause, the stronger your self-command. It becomes second nature, not through suppression, but through transformation. You feel the heat rise, but you breathe instead of boiling. You feel the sting of words, but you immediately turn inward to see where the sting found purchase. You return to your center where principle lives and self-truth waits. You become fluent in your inner language. The subtle signals that once controlled you now become tools for insight. Even when emotion rises, you do not run from it or blindly obey it. You listen and then you choose. You own your energy and your actions reflect intention rather than impulse. In time, this becomes your character. Insightful, resilient, self-aware. To master this gap is to master the self. And to master the self is to turn every insult into an opportunity for growth. Not because nothing touches you, but because nothing defeats you. It is to become an inner architect in a loud world. Not hardened, but deliberate. Not distant, but discerning. It is not apathy. It is deep self-knowledge. This is not detachment. It is the height of connection to your character, your intention, and your ongoing evolution. You are not unfeeling. You are simply unmoved by what doesn't serve your deeper truth. That is the Stoics' gift and their discipline, to feel fully, to question deeply, and to choose wisely. To walk through life and expect never to be criticized is to live in perpetual disappointment. People are reckless with their words. Some are malicious. Some are careless. Some are simply mirrors of their unresolved chaos. Others are just speaking from their pain without even realizing it. The Stoic knows this, so they prepare for it. They don't imagine a world free from judgment. They prepare to walk through it, using its friction for their own refinement. They don't expect perfection from others, and so they're not surprised when they encounter disrespect. They expect it, not with cynicism, but with calm preparedness. They recognize that criticism often says more about the speaker than the subject. It reveals the speaker's state of mind, not the listener's worth. A venomous tongue is often the symptom of an unwell soul. Epictetus taught, if anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, he was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone. The insult is not the wound. Your internal vulnerability to it is. If you let it pass through, it vanishes. If you grip it tightly, it cuts. If you wear it like armor, it becomes your identity. But if you hold it up as a mirror, it becomes a guide. The Stoic sees insult as a test, not of their worth, but of their self-knowledge. What in me still believes this could be true? What part of me is looking for permission to feel offended? What part of me attaches its identity to how others label me? What in me needs this to be false to feel strong? What in me is reacting, not because I'm hurt by them, but because I'm still insecure about this? This is the true diagnostic tool of insult. It doesn't reveal others, it reveals you. It points to your unfinished work. If someone calls you selfish and it stings, maybe you fear it's true. If someone mocks your dream and it rattles you, maybe you haven't claimed it fully yourself. If someone dismisses your effort and you feel diminished, maybe you're still outsourcing your validation. Insult only lands where doubt already lives. The Stoic doesn't respond with defensiveness, but with reflection. They ask, what is this moment trying to teach me about my own beliefs, my areas for growth? To use insult as a mirror is to see the comment as data, not a definition, as input, not identity. If someone calls you weak, you ask, "Do I believe I am?" If yes, grow. If no, discard. Either way, you don't spiral. You reflect. You use the insult as a mirror, not a mirror to stare into with shame, but one to polish your integrity. You treat the comment like a stone thrown at a fortress. If it hits something solid, it falls to the ground. If it shatters a window, you repair the window, not chase down the stone thrower. You rebuild from within because chasing every critic is a distraction from becoming who you're meant to be. This requires inner honesty, brutal honesty. It's easy to say, "I don't care what people think," and still carry their words like weights in your mind. It's easy to act indifferent while burning inside from the sting of someone's judgment. Many mask their wounds with apathy, but the Stoic doesn't settle for appearances. They don't fake detachment. They build it through truth. They ask themselves, "Where does this still live in me?" And then they go to work on it, not through repression, but through resolute self-inquiry. They know that pretending not to care is not power. True power is when the words bounce off because they hold no weight in your world. It's when you've sorted out your identity so thoroughly that no external voice can cloud it. You don't need to posture. You don't need to retaliate. You don't even need to respond. You simply know who you are, and no insult can rewrite that. Your worth does not need defense because it is no longer on trial. Insults will come, misunderstandings will come, criticism, cruelty, dismissal, they will all come. You cannot stop them. And the Stoic doesn't try to, because the Stoic knows that a life lived with purpose will always brush against resistance. They understand that standing for anything invites opposition. But none of these external attacks can truly touch you without your consent to internalize them. The Stoic trains to withhold that permission not out of stubbornness or pride, but out of a higher allegiance to clarity, to composure, to their own cultivated self-knowledge. They develop the muscle to pause before letting outside events define inner experience. They learn to treat insults like weather. They may pass through, but they don't penetrate the foundation. They do not let outside chaos dictate their internal climate. The Stoic carries self-awareness like a shield, not to block the world, but to walk steadily through it, knowing what to deflect and what to use for growth. They guard their self-respect the way a scientist guards a hypothesis, not with aggression, but with quiet testing, not with noise, but with knowing. Not every challenge is worth a defensive response, and not every insult deserves internal dwelling. Their response is not silence out of defeat. It is silence out of self-mastery. It is restraint born from strength, not absence of courage. It's not about shielding the ego. It's about cultivating self-truth. Because once the insult finds a receptive insecurity inside you, it multiplies, mutates, and becomes part of your self-concept. The mind recycles it, reinforces it, and builds identity around it unless you stop it at the door. Unless you choose to remain the gatekeeper of your worth and the fearless explorer of your inner landscape. This is how the Stoic turns every external challenge inward, not by silencing the world, but by understanding the echo within. The true work is internal, deconstructing the insecurities and fragile beliefs that allow insult to take root. They work at the root, at the beliefs that make them vulnerable to attack. They examine what within them still craves acceptance or reacts to disapproval, and they dismantle that craving piece by piece. They do not try to win arguments with fools or change the mind of someone committed to misunderstanding them. They do not waste breath justifying what needs no justification. They do not wrestle shadows. They simply build a self so rooted in truth that lies have no soil to grow in. When there is nothing inside that believes the insult dies where it lands. The inner soil is stone. Nothing false can take root there. The Stoic becomes unshakable not because they avoid friction, but because they understand it. They become calm not because the world is gentle, but because they have mastered the terms on which they engage with it. To be insulted is human. To need to prove otherwise is fear. But to pause, examine, and let it pass, that is freedom. That is what the Stoic cultivates. That is what makes them untouchable in a world full of noise. Not untouchable in arrogance, but in alignment. Not through withdrawal, but through wisdom. They do not resist insult with fury. They dissolve it with understanding. They do not armor their ego. They anchor their soul. And anchored souls do not drift in storms. They remain quiet and whole while the world howls past them. The journey of using insult as a mirror is not about becoming impervious to pain. It's about becoming more precisely shaped by it. The Stoic understands that character is not built in comfort, but in friction. Every unkind word, every unfair judgment, every moment a perceived flaw is highlighted is an opportunity. It is a moment to step into the inner forge, not to hide, but to temper your spirit. What you allow to be revealed about your internal landscape through external pressure becomes the very material for your self-mastery. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, repeatedly emphasizes the turning of obstacles into opportunities. This applies profoundly to the sting of criticism. Is this criticism pointing to a genuine area for growth? If so, embrace it as a painful but necessary truth, a gift disguised as a weapon. If it is unfounded, then the test is in your ability to remain unswayed, to recognize the external noise for what it is, a reflection of their state, not yours. The Stoic refuses to let any external comment be wasted. They audit their internal reactions like a craftsman audits their tools. Is this internal sting serving me? Is it prompting real change or merely fueling defensiveness? Every challenge to your self-concept is an invitation to deepen it, to fortify it with truth rather than external validation. The Stoic chooses to view external challenges as essential elements in their personal development. They are not masochists, they are pragmatic. They know that a single toxic idea repeated enough can take on the illusion of truth within your mind unless actively dismantled. The Stoic prevents this not through fear, but through fearless self-examination. This means saying yes to discomfort, yes to probing why a certain word hits a nerve, yes to sitting with the feeling of inadequacy if it arises and asking it questions, yes to stepping into the arena of self-improvement when an external comment highlights a weakness. This is not about seeking out pain, but about using the inevitable pains of life as fuel. They say yes not to validate the critic, but to elevate their being. Every yes to inner truth is a sacred no to superficiality. They say yes not to escape discomfort, but to build an authentically strong self. Because attention is finite, and if you don't direct it inwards, external noise will define you. Your reaction to an insult is a vote for the reality you wish to reinforce. React carelessly, and you will live at the mercy of others. Examine wisely, and you will shape a centered, resilient one. What you examine grows stronger. This includes not only what you engage with externally, but also how you respond internally to what is sent your way. Building an unshakable self is not a gift. It is a practice. It is not passively acquired. It is actively maintained. It is built in the quiet moments of daily introspection, in the uncomfortable feelings you don't run from, the self-talk you question, the truths you allow to surface. It is strengthened in the moments no one sees. When you choose inquiry over instant judgment, self-awareness over deflection, and genuine understanding over performative confidence, it is the result of mental choices repeated, refined, and reinforced over time. It is the sum of tiny decisions to reject what weakens you and welcome what strengthens you. It is a lifestyle of conscious self-audit, of thoughtful engagement, of sustained mental hygiene. It is both a philosophy and a mirror, a way of seeing the world, and a way of seeing what belongs in your mental world. Every external comment is either a distraction or a diagnostic tool. Every word you absorb is either a toxin or a path to truth. The Stoic doesn't just guard what they think. They guard how they think about what others say. True strength is not accidental. It is curated, and the Stoic curates carefully. They do not wait until their mind are chaotic to begin filtering. They don't clean up after the storm. They reinforce the levees. They filter before the chaos enters. They know that once the noise finds a weakness inside, it's harder to silence. That's what it means to use insult as a mirror, not waiting to recover from noise, but choosing to let the noise reveal your landscape. It's a proactive mindset. It's the discipline of guarding your gates, not to shut the world out, but to ensure what comes in is worthy of your energy and can be used for your growth. They learn to recognize the scent of manipulation, the tone of projection, the shape of emotional theft, and, most importantly, the resonance of their inner insecurities. In this way, the Stoic transforms the sanctuary of their inner life, not through isolation, but through intense self-knowledge. They preserve their peace the way an alchemist protects their experiment, not because they are afraid of the elements, but because they respect the transformative work they are meant to do. The moment you begin to seek self-knowledge to impress others, you lose it. The Stoic does not cultivate inner strength as an aesthetic. They don't seek to appear unflappable. They seek to be self-aware and truly resilient. There's a difference. One is concerned with optics, the other with substance. One needs external validation, the other is content with inner truth. One is rooted in performance, the other in principle. The Stoic understands that true peace cannot be borrowed. It must be built, and it can only be built through inward honesty, not outward applause. In a world that rewards performative confidence and curated personas, the Stoic refuses to play along. They are not interested in pretending that insults don't potentially bother them. They are committed to understanding why they do and addressing that root cause. And that difference is visible not in words, but in actions. The performative person silences their mouth while their mind burns. The Stoic silences their mind first by understanding its reactions. They don't suppress. They settle into truth. They do not want to seem invulnerable. They want to live as someone who understands and addresses their vulnerabilities, thereby rendering them less powerful. This type of peace isn't theatrical. It's foundational. This is not about hiding pain. It is about transmuting it into insight. Not about avoiding criticism, but confronting it with composure and curiosity. Pain is not dismissed. It is studied, understood, and repurposed. The Stoic does not ignore discomfort. They absorb it and let it teach them, shape them, but never break them. They know that the need to be seen a certain way is itself a disturbance. It is a subtle slavery, a life lived for mirrors of others' opinions, not internal meaning. Mirrors are fragile, external, and inconsistent. Meaning is rooted, inward, and resilient. The Stoic opts for the latter. They let go of the craving to impress, the compulsion to manage perceptions, the addiction to being liked, and in doing so, they reclaim the power to live without acting. They become whole. They become quiet, not in silence, but in essence. They show up not as a version of themselves designed for approval, but as the clearest expression of their values and their discovered truths. They do not waste their energy editing their soul for an audience. Their inner world is not open to public revision. They do not look to others to confirm their identity. They know who they are, including their areas for growth, and they walk in that knowing gently, firmly, without need for explanation. To live with insult as a mirror is to stop performing. It is to walk away from the exhausting stage of public validation and return to the simplicity of self-alignment. It is learning to breathe easy in your skin even when the world around you demands a costume. It means measuring your success by your standards of growth, not by how well you fit the mold of others' expectations. It is having the courage to face your discomfort if it means staying true to yourself. To be misunderstood without needing to correct every misunderstanding. To be misjudged without shrinking to fix the judgment. The Stoic is not interested in applause. They are interested in integrity, in doing the right thing quietly, in remaining still inwardly. Even as the crowd misreads them, even as they are misunderstood, overlooked, or misrepresented, they remain anchored in truth. They choose truth over image, alignment over approval. This is not pride. It is peace. The kind of peace that cannot be faked because it doesn't depend on being seen. It depends on being real. And that realness becomes its form of power. Quiet, immovable, and free. Most people hold on to the sting of criticism longer than the criticism itself lasts. They rehearse offense, replay insult, revisit judgment, and in doing so, they keep wounds open. They carry the past into the present, dragging yesterday's fire into today's quiet room. But the Stoic practices letting things pass through after they have extracted the lesson, not because they're indifferent, but because they know their energy is finite, and they choose to direct it toward virtue and self-improvement. They understand that holding on to pain without learning from it is not a form of strength. It is a leak of strength, and strength must be reserved for what truly matters, becoming your best self. To let something pass through doesn't mean you're okay with it. It doesn't mean you condone it, excuse it, or pretend it didn't affect you. It means you don't allow it to build a home inside you without first interrogating its purpose. You don't turn temporary pain into permanent residence. You don't let a single moment of disrespect become your internal narrator without first checking its script. You feel it. You acknowledge it. You learn from it, and then you let it go. Not because it didn't matter, but because it matters too much to stay stuck. Because keeping it without insight does not heal you. It keeps you stuck, and stuckness breeds stagnation. The Stoic doesn't argue with reality. They align with it. They ask, is this insight worth my continued attention, or have I extracted the lesson? Is this pain giving me anything useful? Or am I just reliving it out of habit, out of ego, out of emotional momentum? Am I feeding this fire or letting it burn out now that I've learned from it? There is strength in release, in not making everything personal, in refusing to make pain your identity, in resisting the urge to rewrite your entire character based on a single difficult chapter. There is power in saying, yes, this hurt, but it also revealed something I needed to see. Now it will not define me. Power in holding the story without being consumed by it. When you let the moment pass through, you remain intact. You remain whole. You remain centered. You do not lose yourself to every bump in the road. You don't let small stings become lifelong scars without extracting their wisdom. The Stoic watches the emotional impulse rise, and they do not grip it. They observe it, breathe with it, and allow it to move on, but only after its message has been received. They let it peak, crest, and fall like a wave. They allow it to move through like a storm across the open sky. It changes the atmosphere, but not the foundation. It stirs the surface, but does not shake the roots. Their roots run deeper than reaction. You don't need to hold everything. Some things are meant to be observed, learned from, and released. Some things are meant to pass through you like wind through open doors, felt but not trapped. You can witness pain without hosting it. You can notice anger without giving into it. Not every wound needs a war. Not every offense deserves a shrine in your memory. Not every emotion requires endless excavation. You are not obligated to internalize every rough word, every cold shoulder, every moment of misunderstanding as a definitive statement of your worth. That is not weakness. It is wisdom. That is not surrender. It is a strategy. It is the skill of internal navigation, the ability to move through your mind without getting stuck. The Stoic understands this. They practice emotional hygiene like one tends a sacred space, clearing out residue, wiping away mental dust, letting in light, and examining what the dust reveals. They tend to their inner world with care because they know peace is not self-sustaining. It is self-created and self-informed. And so they live light, not burdened by old battles, not tethered to old narratives, not pulled backward by unfinished conversations or unanswered questions, not held hostage by interpretations that no longer serve their growth. but free to face each moment as it comes, cleanly, clearly, calmly, with no fear of being shaken because there is nothing unexamined left to shake. They are not fragile. They are filtered and refined. They carry no bitterness into their decisions, no resentment into their relationships. They do not drag emotional debris from one moment into the next. They do not hide behind forced forgiveness. They truly release, not because it's easy, but because they've made peace and self-knowledge a priority, not performatively, but deeply, not for others, but for their sanity, for their stillness. They understand that holding on to pain is like drinking poison and expecting clarity. Their past is part of them, but it does not pilot them. It does not sit in the driver's seat. It rides quietly in the back as a companion they've learned from, not a captor they fear. Their memory is not erased, but it is transformed. Pain becomes instruction. Hurt becomes awareness. Experience becomes strength. What once shattered them now sharpens them. What once broke their rhythm now strengthens their pace. Their clarity is the result of letting go, not holding on. Not denying but releasing, not suppressing, but transcending. They are not light because nothing has touched them. They are light because they chose not to carry what does not belong after extracting its wisdom. They do not define themselves by the weight of their wounds, but by the wisdom that grew from them, because they knew the weight would only slow them down, and life is too brief to live bent under burdens that no longer serve. They are not empty. They are intentional. They are not hollow. They are honed. Every choice is deliberate. Every boundary is shaped by values, not vengeance. They are not untouched. They are unburdened, not because they haven't suffered, but because they've alchemized that suffering into presence, into peace, into power. And from that intention, they move forward, unburdened, awake, and whole, grounded in what matters, ready for what comes, carrying only what fuels their path. The Stoic understands something few do in a reactive world. The deepest answer to criticism is not a rebuttal, but self-truth. Stillness is not weakness. To choose not to respond externally is not to surrender your dignity. It is to preserve your power of internal inquiry. In a culture that rewards the loudest voice, the fastest reply, the sharpest retort, the Stoic walks a different path. They do not live on impulse. They live by principle. They do not measure their strength by their ability to retaliate, but by their ability to internalize and learn. They understand that sometimes the truest strength is in the space you hold for self-reflection, not the noise you make in defense. You do not owe an external reaction to every opinion, provocation, or invitation to conflict. You are not required to rise to every bait, to meet every tone with a matching one, to fire back simply because someone threw the first spark. Most provocations are traps disguised as urgency. Most anger is disguised insecurity, searching for company. Most shouting is a whisper begging to be seen. The Stoic knows this. The Stoic knows that what demands their external reaction is not always worth their energy. So they pause. They evaluate with calm, not emotion. They ask, does this truly require my external involvement? Does engaging with this elevate my character or just entangle me in someone else's storm? Will this response build something or just exhaust me in a futile external battle? They do not fall for the illusion that everything needs their external reply. They understand that sometimes silence is not a lack of courage. It is an act of internal leadership. Sometimes disengagement from the external fray is the highest form of self-respect, allowing for deeper internal engagement. To refrain is not to retreat. It is to recognize that just because a flame is offered doesn't mean you must become the fuel. The Stoic practices emotional discernment. They protect their internal landscape with the same devotion others waste on external battles. This is not disengagement from life. It is a refinement of internal response. It's not indifference. It's intelligence. It is a strategic restraint. The Stoic responds internally where it matters, not externally where it's noisy. They do not react to gain ground in every skirmish. They choose their battles by the standard of virtue and self-knowledge, not vengeance or superficial vindication. They know that restraint is not passivity. It is direction. It is known that not every spark needs water. Some need to burn out on their own. It is wisdom under pressure. It is the understanding that real peace doesn't come from dominating every situation. It comes from mastering your temperament and understanding your vulnerabilities. The one who cannot hold their tongue is not free. The one who reacts without pause is not powerful. The one who confuses external reaction with internal relevance is enslaved to every trigger, to every glance, to every word tossed into the wind. They are a puppet to the chaos around them. But the Stoic is composed because power lives in the pause, in the breath before the burst, in the moment where emotion flares and is met by clarity, in the second you reclaim before saying something that leaves a scar, or, more importantly, before internalizing something that leaves a wound. In the moment you choose to protect your peace instead of proving your point. That moment is not small. It is sovereign. In that stillness, self-truth arrives like a guest you invited long ago and nearly forgot. This is where the Stoic operates, not in the arena of applause, but in the solitude of self-command. They don't chase validation. They steward their inner state. They're not interested in being impressive. They're committed to being intact and aware. Their presence speaks for itself. Their restraint echoes louder than most people's noise. They do not silence themselves out of fear. They remain quiet because they are full, not empty, with internal understanding. They do not need to be louder than the chaos. They just refuse to join it. So when the world comes rushing, pushing, testing, and tempting, the Stoic holds their ground. Not frozen, but anchored. Not passive, but precise. Not distant, but deeply grounded. They respond with clarity, internally or externally, or not at all. They respond with principle or not at all. They do not allow urgency to override wisdom. They have nothing to prove because they know who they are and their areas for growth. They have no appetite for validation when their character is already full. They know that presence does not require performance. And when you know who you are, you realize that most noise isn't worth your voice. You realize that most provocations are just distractions wearing urgency as a disguise. You begin to see that clarity is often quiet and is often misread as passivity. That strength is not proven by volume, but by the consistency of your values and your commitment to self-knowledge. That true confidence is not heard, it is felt. And you learn that sometimes the strongest move isn't to respond louder, it's to rise higher, above the bait, above the drama, above the false urgency to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. Because silence is not the absence of thought. It is the presence of self-control and self-awareness. And the one who controls their response controls their path. That's where the Stoic lives. In the space between stimulus and response, where dignity isn't loud, but it is unshakable, where power isn't public, but it is permanent. The Stoic understands that not every battle is worth fighting, and not every external comment requires a rebuttal. In a world obsessed with winning arguments, defending pride, and proving worth, the Stoic steps back and asks a deeper question. What is this revealing about me? Because in truth, some external criticisms are merely echoes of our inner doubts dressed as challenges. They do not build external victory, they drain internal peace. They do not clarify external arguments, they entangle us in our insecurities. And the Stoic is too focused on self-mastery to rent out their energy to superficial conflicts. To stop trying to win the wrong battles means you stop giving your time, thoughts, and words to external fights that distract from internal growth. You stop engaging in ego matches. Stop answering every criticism as if it's a definitive statement about you. Stop proving your value to people committed to misunderstanding it. You begin to understand that your time is sacred and your presence is a resource. To spend it in places where your truth is only weaponized or dismissed is not noble. It is negligent. The Stoic knows that needing to win all the time is its form of weakness. The obsession with always being right, always being heard, always being externally validated. This is the ego trying to use battle as proof of value. The Stoic sees this. They understand that peace is not found in external conquest. It's found in internal clarity. And clarity comes when you let go of needing to be right more than you need to be aligned with your deepest self. This isn't about giving up. It's about growing up. It's the wisdom to walk away without bitterness, the clarity to see that silence is often the higher ground for introspection, the maturity to know that energy must be conserved for what matters most, your development. It's understanding that your peace and self-knowledge are too expensive to be traded for petty debates or unproductive external validation. Not every insult needs an external rebuttal. Not every wrong needs a public courtroom. Not every misunderstanding is a crisis that demands your defense. The Stoics filter their engagements through a higher lens. Does this protect my peace? Does this build my character? Does this serve my purpose? Will this help me become who I want to be by revealing something within me? If not, they let it go without hesitation or guilt. Because sometimes letting go is not surrender, it's mastery. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to explain yourself to every doubter. You don't have to react to every jab, justify every decision, or convince every skeptic. The Stoic accepts that people will form opinions based on their wounds, their own projections, and their own narratives. These stories rarely have anything to do with you, and trying to fight those stories only gives them more weight. The more you push back, the more energy you lose. The Stoic understands that most opinions are mirrors for the speaker, not windows into your truth. And so they let go, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. Not because they can't fight, but because they know some fights just aren't worth their breath or their internal attention. They don't waste arrows on wind. True strength is choosing your battles and often winning them within. Not because you're afraid to lose, but because you've already won by walking away, by knowing your values and standing by them without needing external applause. The Stoic walks away with their integrity intact, their dignity undisturbed, their values upheld. They don't waste time proving themselves. They invest time in becoming themselves. They trade noise for nourishment, ego for essence, external defense for internal direction. And in that choice, they find the most enduring form of victory. Peace that can't be shaken by noise and self-respect that doesn't depend on external validation. The final truth the Stoic arrives at is this: nobody truly defines you unless you allow them to. That is not denial. That is design. It is not about pretending people are kind when they are cruel or pretending situations are fair when they are not. It's about owning your part in what you carry and what you choose to allow to define you. The world can be chaotic. People can be rude, disrespectful, or even hurtful. But what touches your core truth only does so with your participation. The Stoic does not pretend the world is soft. They simply refuse to let it define them or lead them away from their path of self-knowledge. Nobody defines you because you choose what you absorb as truth. The Stoic has trained the mind to separate external comment from internal reality, impulse from principle. They do not allow the moods of others to dictate the weather of their soul. They do not allow every tone, every insult, every dismissal to become a personal definition. They recognize that most people are walking around reacting from their wounds and their truth. And if someone lashes out, the Stoic sees it for what it is, a reflection of that person's state, or a revealing of their inner landscape, not a definitive reflection of their worth. This is the ultimate power, not over others, but over the inner terrain. When you stop needing people to behave a certain way for you to stay grounded, you become unshakable. When you stop handing over your calm to circumstances, you reclaim something priceless: autonomy of spirit. You realize you are not a puppet of public opinion. You are not a mirror for every mood. You are not a sponge for every energy. You are sovereign. Of course, the world will still test you. People will interrupt, criticize, and misunderstand. The Stoic doesn't deny this. They expect it. They prepare for it. But they do not internalize it as a definition. They don't ruminate, retaliate, or rehearse. They recognize when something is not theirs to hold as truth, and so they drop it. They let the comment pass. They let the judgment sit outside the gates of their self-worth. They do not invite chaos in for tea. To say nobody defines me is not arrogance. It is accountability. It means you've decided your self-worth is your responsibility, not the world's obligation. It means you've stopped being at the mercy of emotional weather. You've stopped outsourcing your steadiness. You've become the builder of your mental fortress. Brick by brick, habit by habit, breath by breath. And in that fortress, there is quiet. Not because the world is silent, but because you've made your mind a place that is no longer ruled by external definition, but by internal truth. There is space in that quiet. Space for wisdom. Space for vision. Space for becoming. You walk slower. You speak less. You see more. You live more because your energy is no longer spent cleaning up after chaos that was never yours to carry as truth. Because nobody defines you. Not because they never try, but because you've stopped giving them the tools to succeed.